Baghdad's children learned two languages, the words they spoke at home and the careful silence they practiced everywhere else, where even a whispered joke about the president could make their fathers disappear before breakfast. Saddam Hussein promised Iraqis stability after decades of coups and chaos, yet delivered something far more efficient: a nation where everyone became both prisoner and guard, where the man who fixed your car might be writing reports about your family, where loyalty wasn't earned through inspiration, but calculated through fear. By the time his statues fell in 2003, over 500,000 bodies had been buried in unmarked graves across the desert, each one representing someone's brother, mother, or child who said the wrong thing to the wrong person. The regime that claimed to unite Iraq instead perfected the art of making its citizens terrorize themselves. The invisible eye watched everything. It lived in classrooms where children earned gold stars for reporting what their fathers said about food rations. The Mukhabarat, Saddam's intelligence apparatus, didn't just spy on Iraqis, it turned them into spies against themselves. Teachers asked students to write essays about home life, mining them for dissent. Neighbors competed to inform first, knowing silence could be mistaken for complicity. By the mid-1980s, Iraq had become a nation of amateur informants, where an estimated 1 in 5 adults worked as eyes for the state. The system was brilliantly simple: reward betrayal, punish loyalty to anyone except Saddam. Families stopped gathering for meals. Parents coded their conversations in metaphors their own children couldn't decode. Trust died in Iraqi homes years before bodies started filling mass graves. The regime understood that psychological warfare was cheaper than bullets and far more effective at breaking a population that might resist. A nation in chaos breeds monsters in the shadows of its collapsing institutions. Iraq, between 1958 and 1979, cycled through coups like seasons: 5 successful overthrows, countless failed attempts, each promising stability while delivering more bloodshed. The monarchy fell in 58, with King Faisal's body dragged through Baghdad's streets. Military strongmen rose and fell. Firing squads became routine. Into this power vacuum stepped the Ba'ath Party in 68, offering Iraqis something they desperately craved: order, modernization, and pan-Arab pride. Schools were built, literacy campaigns spread, women entered universities. For a brief moment, Iraq seemed to be climbing toward something better. But beneath the propaganda posters and development projects, a security apparatus was growing, one that would perfect the art of control through fear. The Ba'athists didn't just want power. They wanted total dominance over every Iraqi heart and mind, and they found their perfect instrument in a young enforcer named Saddam Hussein. The day terror took power arrived with cameras rolling and hundreds of witnesses trapped in their seats. July 22, 1979. Saddam Hussein stood before an emergency Ba'ath Party conference, smoking a cigar while reading names from a list. Each name belonged to a colleague, a comrade, someone who had worked beside these men for years. As names were called, security guards dragged the accused from the auditorium, while those remaining were forced to applaud. Some begged, others went silent. The room became a theater of horror, where survival meant clapping for your friend's arrest. 68 party members were named that day. 22 were executed immediately, shot by firing squads composed of their own colleagues, because Saddam understood that forcing participation creates complicity. High-ranking officials were handed rifles and ordered to pull triggers on men they'd known for decades. Blood bound them to the regime now. The purge didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, hundreds more disappeared. Families received bodies with torture marks. The message was perfectly clear: absolute loyalty or absolute destruction. Iraq had seen coups before, but this was different. This was systematic, calculated, a masterclass in terror as governance. Saddam didn't just take power. He made an entire nation watch while he did it, teaching them that resistance was suicide. The architecture of fear was built with portraits and laws that made thinking a crime. Saddam's face watched from every classroom, every office, every shop, smiling benevolently, while his secret police disappeared anyone who didn't smile back enthusiastically enough. By the mid-1980s, insulting the president carried a death sentence. So did criticizing Ba'ath Party policies. So did remaining silent when others praised the great leader. The regime passed laws making entire families responsible for one member's dissent. Brothers executed for their siblings' words, parents imprisoned for their children's thoughts. This collective punishment turned families into self-policing units where parents monitored their own children's loyalty. Mandatory portraits had to hang in homes, positioned where visitors could see them immediately. Citizens were required to attend rallies, their attendance recorded. The cult of personality became inescapable. Saddam as father, as warrior, as prophet. Iraq suffocated under the weight of forced adoration, where love for the dictator had to be performed constantly or entire bloodlines paid the price. The machine of terror ran on electricity and screams inside buildings that looked ordinary from the street. The Mukhabarat operated dozens of detention centers across Iraq, places where people entered and emerged broken, if they emerged at all. Torture wasn't an interrogation technique, it was policy. Electric shocks were applied to genitals until prisoners lost consciousness. Acid baths dissolved skin. Prisoners were hung from ceiling hooks for days while their shoulders dislocated. Some were lowered into industrial shredders feet first, while others watched. The regime documented everything, keeping meticulous records of who screamed longest, who broke fastest, which methods worked best on different types of dissidents. Then there was Uday Hussein, Saddam's eldest son, who turned brutality into personal entertainment. His private torture chambers became playgrounds for sadism. Athletes who disappointed him had their feet beaten until bones shattered, then were forced to run again. Women who rejected his advances were raped, then fed to dogs. Uday collected victims like trophies, videotaping their suffering for later viewing. This wasn't chaos or madness. This was systematic, bureaucratic horror. Torture as governance, cruelty as control. The machine processed thousands of Iraqis through its gears, grinding them into warnings for anyone who might dare question the regime. Bodies became billboards advertising the cost of resistance. Chemical genocide arrived on the wind in March 1988, when Iraqi warplanes dropped poison on the Kurdish town of Halabja. 5,000 people died in hours. Mothers clutching babies in doorways, families frozen mid-flight, their skin blistered and lungs burned from mustard gas and nerve agents. Photographers captured the aftermath. Bodies piled in streets, a father still holding his infant against his chest. But Halabja was just one day in a campaign of extermination. The Anfal operations between 1986 and 89 systematically erased Kurdish villages from existence, over 4,000 settlements destroyed, 182,000 people murdered or disappeared. Chemical Ali, Saddam's cousin, coordinated the genocide with bureaucratic precision. Villages were gassed, survivors rounded up and trucked to mass graves where they were shot and bulldozed into the earth. This wasn't war. This was industrial-scale ethnic cleansing, planned in government offices and executed with military efficiency. The Kurdish people weren't combatants. They were targets marked for elimination simply for existing. Ecological warfare against the marsh Arabs turned water into a weapon of erasure. Saddam drained the ancient Mesopotamian marshes, wetlands that had sustained civilizations for 5,000 years, to punish Shia communities who sheltered after the 1991 uprising. 90% of the marshes vanished within a decade. Fishing villages became cracked mud. Entire ecosystems died. The marsh Arabs, whose culture predated Islam itself, were scattered into refugee camps, while their ancestral homeland transformed into desert. The ghosts that remain live in unmarked graves scattered across Iraq. Over 250 mass burial sites containing perhaps 1 million bodies. Families still search for fathers, brothers, sons who vanished decades ago. Torture chamber records were destroyed, archives burned, evidence disappeared. Children who grew up reporting their parents now raise their own children in a country still haunted by that betrayal. Saddam fell, but the scars he carved into Iraq's soul remain open wounds that refuse to heal.